Welcome to the Polgar Chess University. In this lesson, I'd like to tell you about one of the most common and important mating pattern, and that is the back rank checkmate. What we mean by that is that one of the two kings is on the 8th for black or 1st for white rank, like for example in the position we see on the board right now. What's happening here is that the black king being on the 8th rank on g8 obviously cannot move up towards the 9th rank, as a 9th rank does not exist. The same goes for the white king being on the 1st rank. There is no rank 0. And the other important element in this pattern is that unlike normally when there are rooks or queens or some other pieces on the back rank, here there is none. In some cases, it's sufficient not to have a piece there, but another piece controlling the key squares where the opponent may threaten to checkmate and control that square from a distance. In the current case that we see on the board, neither is happening. Therefore, if it were black's turn in this position, black would move his rook up to c1, attacking the white king, and the white king has no escape on h2 because the black bishop from f4 is guarding that important square. On the other hand, if it's white's turn in this position, then white can move his own rook up to black's back rank, attacking the black king. The black king has no escape because of his own pieces on f7, g7, and h7, the 3 pawns that are typically there to guard the king from attacks, but obviously it does not guard against a back rank checkmate. The only legal move left for black in this position is to move the rook back to c8, but that of course would simply be captured and white could announce checkmate. We'll devote this entire lesson to similar examples of back rank, although of course we'll move on to a little bit more complicated examples of the same theme. So let's move on to another example on the same theme. Here we are. In this position, black is a pawn ahead, while each side has a queen and rook in addition to the pawns. The big question is whether can and should black capture a second pawn with his queen on d5. The answer to that question is a very clear no. Why? Because the black rook right now is busy guarding the back rank, making sure a white rook or queen doesn't end up there checkmating the king. White here would continue by capturing the black queen, and then if black plays the natural, rook captures queen, then all of a sudden there is no more defense on the back rank, and white would be free to move his rook up to a8, attacking the black king, and the checkmate can be only delayed by one more move with blocking the check, and then rook captures rook, checkmate. Let's go back again to the starting position and see what would happen if after queen takes pawn and queen takes queen, black does not capture the queen. Well, in that case, white would simply remain with a tremendous extra material, having a queen, while black don't. The other question that we need to answer is, what should black do then if not to take the pawn? Well, pretty much almost any other move. A very logical move here would be, for example, playing h6, just opening a little window on h7, the square you see highlighted with green, for the black king. So now, for example, if white ignores what has just happened and makes, let's say, a move like this with his pawn to g3, then already the black queen could safely capture the pawn, because after the exchange of queens and the rook coming down to the 8th rank, the black king could soundly escape on h7. Naturally, in a situation like this, after h6, white would need to get busy and protect his pawn, making sure at least not to lose it. Let's move on to our next position, when we have exactly even material for both sides. But it's quite crucial that it's white's turn. It's true that the black rook is on the back rank, guarding that key d8 square, but white has built up a battery between the queen and the rook on the d file, and is able to, by sacrificing the queen on d8, reaching checkmate after rook captures queen and rook captures rook. Checkmate, game over. Again, going back to the starting position, black, if they would be on turn, could simply solve this problem by opening a little window, pushing the h-pawn up to h6. And let's move on and see another example, again on the back rank theme. In this position, black has both his rooks on the 8th rank. It's true that white has his two rooks lined up on the e file, trying to checkmate on e8. However, the immediate attempt with rook e8 would fail, because the black rook would capture, and then there would be a second black rook capturing the white rook. So white needs to be trickier than that. And the beautiful solution is sacrificing the queen for the rook. As we said in previous examples, if in such situations black does not capture the queen, which objectively is the best thing to do, I mean not to capture the queen, but would, let's say, protect the rook or make an escape square for the black king, then white simply won a rook and possibly a second one on the next moves. So typically the main question when you make a sacrifice, when you give up a very strong piece such as a queen or a queen for a rook, the main question is what happens if your opponent accepts actually your sacrifice, that is, captures the queen on b8 in this case. Well, then already black has only one rook left on the 8th rank, and white is ready to bring one rook up to e8, attacking black king, saying check, forcing black to capture, and the end result is again a checkmate on the back rank. Just to give you ideas, I'll share with you some more complex, tricky ways to achieve the back rank checkmate. Let's look at this position. In this position, it seems that black is in a real good shape, having his knight on c2, attacking the white queen and rook at the same time. It also seems that there is no back rank danger at all, as black has his rook safely on the back rank, guarded by his king. And yet, white can force a checkmate here in 3 moves. When I am talking about forced moves, what I mean is that one side, in this case black, will not have any choices. The first move is queen captures rook, check. Forced moves typically are checks or captures or both. Like in this case, black has only one legal move, that is, to capture the white queen. Now, if you're searching for forceful moves, such as checks, you'll have only one move, so you'll know the move. And that move is the bishop coming to c5, attacking the black king. Again, the black king has only one move. Well, it's true, black could block the check with the queen, but that wouldn't change on the outcome of the game. So let's see what happens after king moves back to g8. Now, I bet you know the answer. Yes, it is. Rook moving up to e8. A very pretty combination. The next one is one of my favorites in this lesson. The position we see on the board, black is having an extra rook. Black has two rooks while white only has one rook. It's true that white has a far advanced passed pawn on a7, but if that pawn would advance and become a queen, it wouldn't be long-lived because the black rook would capture the white queen. Also, giving a check, making a forceful move, wouldn't lead anywhere, as the black king would simply move out of that check, and even now, if the pawn promotes to a queen, the rook would capture it, and rook captures would leave black still a rook ahead and in a completely winning position. Again, going back to the starting position, the big question is then, how can white still win this game? It's one of those rare occasions that even though black has a major material advantage, white can afford to make a quiet move threatening checkmate and black is helpless. And that move is to play g6. Now that little pawn takes away the escape square of the black king. And even if the king would try to move out of the corner, that little pawn guards also in the other direction, so it wouldn't help. White would still checkmate on the back rank. A very nice example when a quiet move decides the game. Let's move on to the next position. Here we are. In this position, it's black's turn for a change. The obvious move, capturing the white queen on c6, wouldn't be the best choice, because then the white rook could do the same, capturing the black queen. And if you look carefully, you'll notice that white is a pawn ahead. After black answers this check, for example by moving the king out of the check, then white would have the time to solve the back rank problem by opening a little window for the king on g2. It's important to notice that at the moment, even though white has already moved his h-pawn up, the bishop on d6 at the moment doesn't let the white king escape through h2. Okay, so we know what black shouldn't do. We know that black should not capture the white queen, but what should black do? Well, here black again has a beautiful combination by sacrificing the queen, capturing the rook. And again, if queen captures queen, black will checkmate real soon after rook c1 check, with the only move being knight to block on e1, and then rook captures knight, checkmate, as again the h2 square is guarded by the black bishop on d6. Let's see another example that's very typical in many games. In the position we see on the board right now, it seems that the black king is in a much safer position than white. The white king is wandering around in the middle of the board on e3. As long as there are queens on the board as well as other pieces, the king typically is not in a safe position being out there on e3 instead of its normal place g1 or h1 where it would be hiding from danger. In fact, if it were black's turn, black would capture the pawn on c3 with the rook, and that would be an immediate checkmate. Luckily for white, it's white's turn. And in fact, white, with a forceful series of moves, can force the checkmate in just 3 moves. Again, when we talk about forceful moves, we typically talk about checks. And the first move is the only check in the position. Queen captures pawn on f7. Now black has 2 choices. The obvious one, rook capturing the queen, or moving the king out of the check to the corner. If that's what black would do, move the king to the corner, the answer is quite obvious. Queen capturing rook, checkmate. But what happens after rook captures queen? Well, you know the theme. Then again, a rook would show up on b8, attacking the king, leaving black with only one option, that is to block the check, and then white would have a pleasant choice to capture black's rook with either rook, and either one would end the game by checkmate. And let's see some more examples on the same theme. Here we are. In this position, black has an obvious checkmate threat, moving his queen to g2, checkmating the white king. The question is, what can white do about it? Well, if you search for defense, you won't find one. However, white can create his own combination again to use the back rank weakness of black. The obvious try to give a back rank checkmate with the rook moving up to e8 at first doesn't seem to work, as the black knight is right there guarding it and can capture the rook. However, after a closer look, you'll notice that the white queen now has opened the diagonal from a5 to d8 and is able to move there and checkmate black's king. What a nice combination, not only escaping the loss, but actually turning things around and winning the game. Let's move on to the next example. Here again, just like in the previous position, black is about to checkmate white by moving the queen down to the corner to h1. Also, it seems that black has enough defense on the c8 square by the bishop as well as the knight. However, sadly for black, white has 3 linear pieces lined up on the c file and is ready to move the queen to sacrifice the queen on c8. Of course, very importantly, the white bishop is controlling the escape square on h7. So black has nothing better to do than to capture the queen, and after the rook captures the bishop, capture the rook, but at the end of the day, the third piece arrives on c8 that already cannot be captured, and the check cannot be blocked either. Black is in checkmate. With all these examples, I'm trying to give you ideas on how this same theme of back rank checkmate can be used to your advantage. In the next position, we'll see an example when the same theme is being used to win material, not necessarily end the game right away with checkmate. Well, if I ask you the question, which side has a back rank problem, what would you say? Well, the correct answer is black. White already has opened the little window with the H pawn being on H3. Sadly for black, they didn't. And therefore, with white being on move, white is ready to take advantage of this weakness. The white queen is able to capture the black rook safely, because if now black would choose to capture the queen, then indeed the game would end right away after a check, and the checkmate could only be delayed by first blocking the check with the queen and then with the knight, and white would simply just eat up all those pieces and say checkmate. So the moral of the story in such positions is, if you're, for example, on the black side, that you would want to just open a little window to make sure such combination wouldn't work. The next example we see, the black king is not even on the back rank. Yet, white can force it to go there and then checkmate on the following move. It seems that black has a major advantage in this position, having his queen, while white only has the rook. But yet, white being on move, white will give a check, forcing the black king back to the 8th rank, and then ready to checkmate. You'll see a couple of examples for a similar theme. Here we go. Black again has major advantage, is threatening to checkmate along the long diagonal on either b2 or a1. At the moment, moving the rook up to f8 wouldn't do any good because the black king would simply capture the rook. However, if you look carefully, you'll notice that white has an opportunity to give a check with the bishop, and with that, forcing the black king to the corner, and now already the white rook is ready to come up and say checkmate. And the next example will be very similar, but the aid to the rook will be the knight. Here again, the white knight is able to come to d7, check. Black has only one legal move, moving to the corner, and then the white rook is ready to capture black's and again announce checkmate. The following example will be an interesting one when white uses the back rank checkmate to promote his pawn. And this again happens a lot in tournament play. White has a dangerous pass pawn that reached next to the promotion square. But in the meantime, the black rook is guarding it, not letting it advance and become a queen. What white can do here is move the rook to b1. Now, if black would capture that dangerous pawn, then the rook would end up on b8 and say checkmate. The only way to prevent this for black is by either moving one of his pawns, for example, the g-pawn, or moving the king to f8. After any of those choices, white would move the rook up to b8, check, and now if the black king moves out of the check, white would simply capture black's rook, or if the rook would capture the white rook, the white pawn would recapture and get promoted to a queen at the same time. A very nice trick to use. And finally, let's see a couple of examples when the weaker side can successfully defend, choosing the right answer. In this position, if white immediately moves the rook up to f8, black would have enough defense on the 8th rank as this trade of queen for the two rooks would help actually black. But how about queen captures queen first? Now, if the rook from the 8th rank recaptures, then already white is ready to win the game by rook f8. And here comes the difference, that after queen captures queen, black has an option, a better option, capturing with the other rook from e2. And now having two rooks defending the crucial f8 square is sufficient against white's two rooks. Let's move on to the next example. Here it's black's turn. White has a very serious threat of trading rooks on g8, and when the black king would recapture, the second rook would come down to c8 and checkmate. Black has only one move in this position that can solve the problems. And that move is to put the second rook also on b8. And either rook white captures now, black just recaptures and is home safe. And here is our final example for this lesson. In this position, black is threatening to give checkmate on g2, a very dangerous threat that cannot be stopped. But what happens if the white queen captures the black rook? This is one of those situations. If you find the right move, you win. You choose the wrong one, you lose. The wrong one would be to capture with the king, because now white would be ready to move the rook up to d8 and then end the game with rook takes d8 checkmate. Therefore, the only correct answer is to capture the queen with the rook, not allowing any further checks or checkmate, of course, and then on the following move, black is ready to checkmate himself. Well, these were very instructive examples on the back rank, and I bet you have a better understanding of it now than you did half an hour ago. Well, keep coming back and you'll keep learning more and more about the secrets of chess. Take care. Bye-bye until next week.